Hey guys, welcome to the Upper Hand Fantasy Podcast. This is Faraz Siddiqui. I'm here with Zach Rizzuto. We're gonna go over some buys and sells going into Week 8. Zach, how you doing? How you feeling going into Week 8? About the halfway point of the fantasy season. How are your teams doing so far?
Not very good. Not Justin Herbert. Yeah, I was gonna say Justin Herbert gave me a glimmer of hope, not last week or any week this season. Justin Fields gave me a glimmer of hope just last week actually it was Monday night, so 2 nights ago. I was thinking I might be able to come back when he put up those 21 points, and they didn't. I am 3-4 in the only league that matters. I am 2-5 in one of my friend leagues, but the one league that I am 5-2 in is our followers league for Upper Hand Fantasy. So at least I'm showing out in that one. No money on that one, of course, but that's the one I'm doing well in.
Hey man, it's a lot of bragging rights in that one. So those
yeah.
guys are pretty. The guys in that league are pretty competitive, right? So there's been some few trades that went down and all that. So shout out to those guys in the Upper Hand Fantasy Followers League. I mean, like for me on my end, like I'm doing okay. A few leagues I'm six and one league I'm 6-1 in. Another league, well, I have like 7 leagues this year. I really cut it down. 7 leagues I really care about. I'm in a few other ones that I have people managing for me for the most part that I drafted. But for the most part, like I'm doing all right. Like I had no teams that are like absolutely dead in the water. I did early in the year. I was able to kind of make my way back a little bit. But no teams that are dead in the water right now, which is good. That's what you want. A couple teams like 4-3, 3-4. A couple teams that are like I have one team that's 5-2. Only one team that's 6-1 right now. That team I got a little lucky in. That league I got a little lucky in this year because kind of going up against teams that haven't had the best weeks, right? That happens sometimes. But yeah, just continuing to make moves, and if you're not killing it so far this year, and even if you are, like there's always a move to be made that could improve your team, right? If you're not doing so well, you might want to take your best player and splitting that player into a couple of other players, right? Like if you have Cooper Kupp, but you only have 1 or 2 wins in the season, there might be a situation where you just want to take your Cooper Kupp, take your Christian McCaffrey, take your Josh Jacobs, split them into a couple really good players, split it to maybe a Kenneth Walker and solid, a Chris Olave or something like that. You know what I mean? And try to spread that out a little bit. So what kind of that's the kind of stuff you have to consider at this point, because listen, you can still make the playoffs, right? We still have we got week 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. We still have 7 weeks before the playoffs start. You have 7 weeks to potentially make it to your playoffs, even if you don't have a great record right now. If you're 2-5 right now and you get 5 wins right over the next 7 weeks, you're going to be sitting okay. You still have a chance, right? You're going to be sitting at 7-7, right? So you still have a chance. It's not dead yet. Continue to make moves and continue to work the waiver wire. All right, enough of the motivational speeches. Let's get into some news. Number one, Russell Wilson says he'll be ready to go. I don't know if you saw that tweet from one of their beat reporters. I forgot exactly who it was, but the tweet basically said that on the plane home, coming back from that game that Denver just had, Russell Wilson, while everybody was sleeping, it was a 7-hour flight, something like that. Russell Wilson, for 5 of those hours, was going up and down the aisles, stretching, and doing knee ups. Knee ups, is that what it's called?
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm just like, yo, like this guy is on another level. I cannot wait until like the biopic on Russell Wilson comes out. I feel like he's on this trajectory to just being this like amazing piece of our culture that we don't realize is here right now. Kind of like Kanye West, when Kanye West was coming up doing his thing. Now Russell Wilson's being that guy. All right, here we go. I found the tweet. Zach Stevens said that Russell Wilson worked out and stretched for 4 of the 8 hours on the flight from Denver to London. Oh, right, because they're going to London and playing in London this week. Said he was doing high knees in the aisle while the rest of the guys were asleep. That's what was going on that flight. So, I'm sure his teammates love him. But he might play this week. He said he's feeling good and he might be good to go. Just wanted to put that out there just in case anybody was worried about their quarterback situation going into London. Okay. Jameis Winston, he still isn't healthy, according to Nick Underhill, one of the Saints beat reporters. Andy Dalton might make another start this week. He had a big game last week. So, that's something to keep in mind if you're streaming quarterbacks. Travis Homer has been designated to return by the Seahawks. This is only worth noting because if anything were to happen to Kenneth Walker, I believe that Travis Homer would be very intriguing to me. I'm a fan of his, like from what I've seen and how he's looked this year in the preseason, and with his limited opportunities, he's looked pretty good and pretty explosive. Not to say that he could really carry a full workload, but somebody who could potentially be efficient. If Kenneth Walker were to go down, we know that this offense is a plus offense to be on. So something to keep in mind as a potential handcuff moving forward. Yeah. Zeke is not practicing today, Ezekiel Elliott, because of the knee injury he suffered during the game. Keep an eye on that, because if he doesn't end up going this week, Tony Pollard can end up going crazy. I'd assume it's not serious since Zeke went back into the game. You got to keep in mind that he played with this PCL injury all year last year as well, and he continued to get work. But just continue to keep an eye on these practice reports as the week continues.
Yeah, with Zeke, he did have that PCL injury, like you said, and he has historically been extremely durable, much to the chagrin of Tony Pollard owners and a lot of Cowboys fans too. But I wouldn't expect Zeke to miss time, even though the practice report, it's only Wednesday if he's not practicing today. That's usually the veteran day off. I think he's earned that. He played through a lot. He doesn't miss games. Be surprised if he doesn't play, but definitely have Tony Pollard locked and loaded in your lineup if he would happen to miss. I don't think that's going to happen. I think that he's going to get normal workload like usual. If we hear that he's not practicing tomorrow, maybe then I might consider. But right now, I'm proceeding like a normal week.
Yeah. Okay. Tony Pollard, to note, Tony Pollard did end up out-snapping Zeke last week for the first week this year. Maybe that happens, just to kind of keep Zeke a little fresh, right?
Yeah.
Could happen again, maybe. All right, let's get right into the buys and sells, man. We spoke. So a couple of guys we spoke about already this week that I'm not going to necessarily bring up this week. Number one was Brian Robinson, like we spoke about selling him. So you can look into. We have some clips up on Instagram. You can go and check out that why we want to sell Brian Robinson. We also spoke about buying Amon-Ra St. Brown extensively last week. And now we have an opportunity. You know what? We're going to get into Amon-Ra St. Brown today, actually. We can do that. We spoke about selling Chuba Hubbard and Deontay Foreman as well, right? So, like, you can look into yesterday's episode, the episode before that, and we'll talk about Chuba Hubbard and Deontay Foreman. I also have a clip up on Instagram at Upper Hand Fantasy that goes over why we want to sell those two Panthers running backs, okay? But let's get into some other names, right? I feel like if we kept the same names, we'll just be using the same guys, right? So, The first guy I want to get into is Jonathan Taylor, right? Jonathan Taylor, he is the RB20 in fantasy points per game this year. There's too much talent. His role is too good for him to not end up as a RB1. He played limited snaps in his first game back. I don't expect that to continue. He saw legit target share from Matt Ryan. Obviously, there's a quarterback change as well. So you get to buy him you get to buy some risk as well, which is going to make him cheaper. So this high-end RB1 we drafted him to be, I think that title is still attainable for him. Okay, so I personally am buying now before he gets fully healthy.
Yeah, I think you're right on the money. It's definitely high-end RB1 is within, what he can be this season still. I haven't seen Jonathan Taylor look like bad when he's on the field. It's not like I'm looking at him and be like, wow, looks like he lost a step, or wow, he's dropping the ball a ton. No, he just caught 7 of his 8 targets. He's, getting work in the pass game. He's just on a bit of a count right now, I think, for his rushing attempts because he was coming off that injury. He's going to continue to get healthier. He's going to start to look more and more like Jonathan Taylor. And as we get further into the season, assuming that maybe the Colts have a decent chance of at least being as a player for a wild card spot, we'll see how things go with Sam Ehlinger at quarterback. But assuming that games are meaningful down the stretch, they'll start to lean on him more and more. I think that there's no reason to think that he can't get to where he needs to be and where we drafted him to be. I think Jonathan Taylor has the talent. There's no reason to bet against him. He's just had a rough opening of the year. And as we talked about in other podcast episodes, he historically has started slow and heated up as the season goes on. So I'm buying Jonathan Taylor if I can right now.
100%. I'm also buying Amon-Ra St. Brown. This is another similar situation where you can get a high-end player on the cheap. He almost had a concussion last week. He actually did not have a concussion last week. He's in the concussion protocol. They expect him to be removed from the concussion protocol pretty soon, obviously before the game this week. But this gives you another chance to buy Amon-Ra St. Brown. Okay, he's a top 6 fantasy wide receiver who is not being viewed as one. So, and managers are frustrated with Amon-Ra St. Brown and the fact that they haven't been able to use him for weeks. So I'm buying now from all those frustrated managers, and I want to buy him now before he reminds everybody who he is for fantasy.
Right. Even though you already got a piece of the pie and he already missed a game for you. I'm glad to see that you're not completely turned off to that idea yet of having.
And that's the point.
Amon-Ra St. Brown being a buy. He's a buy for me too.
Yeah, that's the point, right? It's like, the fact that he he frustrated managers even more, with the concussion, and then him starting the game, him getting hurt so early, and a lot of people probably taking the L because of it, right? People can be frustrated. So exactly, that's part of the reason why. Yes, it can frustrate you if you have him, but that's part of the reason why you could buy him.
Yeah, it's the perfect storm as a buyer of Amon-Ra St. Brown. If you have Amon-Ra St. Brown right now, you're probably looking to cut ties as soon as you can. Obviously, as a seller, you're not going to be able to have his price that high, and that's what's perfect for buyers. Like we said, it's a perfect storm. The production is low. He's missed games, and he's missed games not like in a regular fashion where they're called out a couple of days before the game. Not to have him in your lineup. But you mentioned, he starts the game and he gets out on the first drive, and that screws you for the day. He was in their lineups. That's going to disenchant a lot of people with Amon-Ra St. Brown. So this is, like I said, the perfect buying opportunity for Amon-Ra St. Brown. We've seen what he can do. The only reason he didn't continue that streak he was on was at least 8 catches or something like that, and something with a touchdown. But he's producing really well. He had that streak going on from last season. The only reason he doesn't have that going right now is because of the injuries that he's had. Once he's back on the field, he's going to be some matchups this week. If you want to make a playoff push, if you're at a spot where you're like 2-5 or 3-4, and you want to make a push, I think that you could add Amon-Ra St. Brown to your team, and he could put you over the top, at least help you to win more games than you've been winning.
I hear that. So another guy that I'm buying right now is Khalil Herbert, and this one might be an interesting one. People are like, wait, what? I'm gonna buy Khalil Herbert? Well, David Montgomery's healthy, okay, and it's not going to be expensive to get Herbert, and he might not even need to be the best part in the package to get him, right? He's been playing better than Montgomery this year, and his head coach has said that he will use the hot hand, right? So this is a situation where you can potentially buy him where he's already getting work, right? He is like the 1B in a very, very close situation. He only had 2 less opportunities than David Montgomery, right? And might as well talk about selling David Montgomery at the same time. Like, we were going to get into that a little bit later, but David Montgomery, like, I'm selling him right now because he's had 3 solid weeks, right? So you still have a nice little sell window open for him. Montgomery was on the field for only 56% of snaps against the Patriots on Monday night, and Herbert, like I said, only trailed him by 2 opportunities. Both of them got touchdowns. David Montgomery got a touchdown in this game, so you have a little bit of a window to sell him, even though his snap share did come down. And the fact that Herbert has been looking good with his opportunities this year, he can potentially gain more work as he continues to look better. And when you look at yards per carry, when you look at yards after contact per attempt, there's a lot of metrics that is leaning in Herbert's favor. So the hot hand can potentially go his way. And if he ends up being the 1A in this backfield at some point, I honestly wouldn't be surprised. I think Montgomery will maintain a role because of his pass blocking abilities and things like that. But in terms of like who they want to touch the ball more, that might be Khalil Herbert.
Yeah. I think Khalil Herbert's kind of earned it, earned a little bit more workload than he's been getting. I wasn't too thrown off. If I'm a David Montgomery manager, I wasn't too thrown off earlier this week when they said that they ride the hot hand, in the backfield. I was like, okay, David Montgomery's had a pretty strong grip on the backfield overall. even with Khalil Herbert playing. I wasn't too worried about it. But then I saw what happened the other night against the Patriots, and it looks like Khalil Herbert is, finally going to get those touches that, people were kind of clamoring for. And now I'm worried. David Montgomery did you a service if you're one of his managers by scoring, and having a good performance like you mentioned. The only reason you can sell him, and we probably have him as a sell right now, is because he scored. Otherwise, it would be way low. So salvage what you can right now. It looks like Khalil Herbert's going to be a bigger player in this backfield than, it looked like at the beginning of the season. And I'd be surprised. I was actually able to pick up Khalil Herbert in one of my leagues off the waiver wire. If you could trade for him, I would still work at it and say that David Montgomery, if I'm trying to get Khalil Herbert, if I'm trying to buy him, I'd say, okay, David Montgomery's still in that backfield. I want him, but, he's not exactly, a high value yet. If the guy that has him is playing hard to get with you, just remind him that David Montgomery is still there and they both produced. I think that you shouldn't be paying too much for Khalil Herbert. Do not overpay. But
Khalil Herbert on Sleeper right now is only 50% rostered, which is unbelievable to me. Like, he's getting work. He's one of the best handcuffs in the game right now. He needs to be rostered, man. And that's how cheap you can get him right now. He's basically a waiver wire pickup in a lot of leagues. So he should not be. This should not be a 1-for-1 type of deal, right? You want to grab him with another better player from another team, right? Yeah. If I'm trying to buy one of these other guys, like for example, I have a few other guys in here who are worth more. Let's say Khalil Herbert's on the same team as whoever has Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I'm trying to buy Amon-Ra St. Brown. You put together a nice little package for Amon-Ra, and you're like, you know what? Throw in Khalil Herbert too. That's kind of how I would play it, right? Not as in like Khalil Herbert's the main piece and like you want Khalil Herbert so badly, because don't show your cards here, right? Like Khalil Herbert should be the guy you're like, oh, whatever, I'll just take him as an add-on, take him as a backup running back. I need some running back depth, right? But meanwhile, Khalil Herbert can potentially, Khalil Herbert's value can potentially keep rising over the next few weeks. All right, let's move on to Michael Pittman.
I think his value's gone from.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Zach. I think that we were lagging a little bit.
Go ahead. Yeah, I think his value has gone from handcuff to now he has some standalone at this point because he's getting a little bit more carries. And obviously, the sample size is a little bit small for Khalil Herbert, what we saw, but it looked really good. And it kind of, backed up the report saying that they're going to ride the hot hand. No, that was the first time I think this season that we've seen them say, all right, we're going to ride the hot hand. And then the usage actually reinforced that. So that's kind of why I'm, warming up to Khalil Herbert, where I wouldn't have a couple weeks ago.
That makes sense. All right, let's move on to Michael Pittman. I'm buying Michael Pittman right now. And a lot of people are like, ew. I don't want to buy Michael Pittman. I get it. And this is why the whole sentiment around Michael Pittman isn't great right now. Okay.
Yeah.
He's coming off a down game. He's going through a quarterback change. But now you get to buy the risk associated to him on the cheap, right? He has been putting up numbers with subpar quarterbacks over the last 2 seasons, right? We already know his floor isn't really that low, right? So the fact that you can buy him, you kind of know what his floor is. His ceiling can be higher. Sam Ehlinger might end up just, hyper targeting him, right? There is that possibility. So with that possibility still there, they're moving on from Matt Ryan for a reason. I think that there is a potential for Michael Pittman's value to actually increase without Matt Ryan. I don't think it's going to decrease much. It's either going to stay the same or it's going to increase. I don't see it decreasing. So for those reasons, and with all of the negativity surrounding him right now, like the aura around him is not positive, right? A lot of moving pieces. I'm buying Michael Pittman because I know the talent is there. I know he's an alpha, and he's going to eat first in that offense in terms of pass catchers go.
Yeah, I'm with you. And the fact is he's been dealing with, turnover at quarterback and subpar quarterback play his whole career. So it's hard to project him to be doing any worse with Sam Ehlinger at quarterback than Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan, he can deliver the ball. He can produce fantasy relevant wide receivers. But the problem with Matt Ryan has been that, he's turning the ball over and taking not himself off the field, but the entire Colts offense off the field. I think this is the reason they're turning Sam Ehlinger to see if they could just get a little decrease in the turnovers and see if that can give the Colts more opportunities on offense. I don't see a situation where Michael Pittman gets downgraded either. I agree with you. I think that the only way for him to go from this point is up. He's been inconsistent. He's had big games and he's had games where he's a little bit off, but the floor that, like you said, even his bad games they're not like putting up donuts. They're not like a guy like Terry McLaurin's going to do to you. You know, Michael Pittman's going to be just fine. I think that, you know, you can definitely leverage the negative aura, like you said, surrounding him. I would try to get him as, you know, pretty darn cheap. Because like you said, right now, I think that there's enough negative sentiment around him that you could pull off a couple steals, depending on the players that you have.
Now, another running back that I wanted to buy was Devin Singletary. Now, there's no overlay for him or anything like that, Mike. Don't worry. But Devin Singletary, you know, he is a solid RB2 for me. Okay. The only reason why I'm a little hesitant to buy Devin Singletary is because we know how active the Bills have been in terms of shopping for a running back. I know they wanted Christian McCaffrey super badly once he was on the market. You know, there's other running backs available, Kareem Hunt potentially, Antonio Gibson potentially. There could be a little bit of a shift in that running back room, right? However, if you're desperately needing a running back, I think Devin Singletary is somebody who has high upside, who is relatively affordable right now, right? Guys like him, guys like Raheem Mostert, you know, these are affordable RB2s that you can buy, you know, if you really need a running back, right? Guys like a guy like Raheem Mostert, though, you know, he's never put together a season where he's had this many touches before in his entire career, and he's past 30. Okay, so buying him right now makes me super. If I have him, I'm using him right until the wheels fall off, pretty much, because he's a solid RB2 right now and a good offense. But Devin Singletary, right, he's on a great offense, right? If the Bills don't end up making a move for a running back, he's going to be an RB2 for you the rest of the season, especially in competitive games. So he's a guy that I'm looking to acquire if you're looking for that RB2 with upside, because he's involved, you know, playing 75% of snaps or more in these competitive games. Somebody you can potentially buy, but you have to know the risk here, especially before the trade deadline. The trade deadline's on Tuesday coming up, November 1st. So, you know, if they don't make a move for a running back by then, I think you're golden at that point.
Yeah. I think you can buy Devin Singletary. I wouldn't be paying much for him at all. I'm not a big fan of the risk associated. And we've seen, you know, him get used a lot. And then there are games where he just doesn't get used at all. I think that Bills running backs have had that tendency since, you know, LaShawn McCoy wasn't there. And even then, LaShawn McCoy was, you know, interesting in his own right. But I think that, you know, with Josh Allen at quarterback and Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, guys like that in the passing game, it's a pass-first offense still. I think it's going to be very situational. I think the risk is enough for me with Devin Singletary to kind of avoid him. You know, he's not I think he might be my last choice to trade for in a supreme pinch. Maybe I would trade for him. But for me, I think the risk is a little bit low, especially like you said, if you're in a spot where you need production right now. I think that his volatility doesn't really, you know, come off to me as appealing if I'm going to be in the trade market. I go for a guy, you know, obviously Kareem Hunt hasn't been excellent, but maybe target him, a guy like him, and go after him because he's had a little bit more, you know, stability in his workload. And I think that, you know, even though the Bills' offense is very good, I think the Dolphins' offense is, you know, kind of right up there with them. I'd go with Raheem Mostert over Devin Singletary if I had the choice.
Did you? I didn't quite catch that. Did you mention Kareem Hunt?
I said about Kareem Hunt maybe as a trade.
Yeah,
someone that you trade for. It's the same situation.
I kind of like that. I want to hit on that real quick. I think that's a good name that you just brought up. He has been underperforming on his touches, you know, this year, right? He hasn't scored that many touchdowns. He pretty much has the same exact role that he's had last year without the touchdowns. So he's somebody that, you know, has had enough touches to the point where like he could get involved a little bit more, right? David Njoku, you know, has been getting targets over the past several weeks, this season, really. And, you know, Kareem Hunt could potentially earn his way to a couple more targets a game because of that. I can see Kareem Hunt having a much better second half of the year than he's had the first half, because he hasn't really made too much noise in the first half of the season. And we're not used to that. You know, by this point last season, the dude was probably like the RB15, RB16 on the year, right?
Yeah.
Even though he's not super consistent, but he's somebody that, you know, you can plug in and hope to have a big game. And I think he's a good target because you can buy him pretty cheap. And then on top of that, you know, he has that RB1 contingency value if Nick Chubb were to ever get hurt, right? So he would be an RB1 play on top of that. And then he's being offered right now for a 4th round pick. So if any teams are, looking for a running back in the NFL, they can put up a 4th round pick and they can grab Kareem Hunt and he'll be an RB1, fantasy RB1 for you. Right. So if you trade for Kareem Hunt right now, you're in desperate need for a running back. Your back is against the wall. Go for it. Go for it. Get Kareem Hunt. Okay.
And it's not going to run you much. It's production. It's not anything.
No.
Yeah. It's not going to be much that you're going to have to pay. I think you look at it, the usage to me kind of indicates that, the Browns are very actively shopping Kareem Hunt, I think, because the first 5 weeks, he had 15 touches, 15 opportunities, 16 opportunities, 13 opportunities, and then 14 opportunities. The past 2 weeks, he's had 5 opportunities and 7 opportunities, which tells me that, suddenly they're not using him. They might not want to leave him as part of their game plan very much anymore if they're going to move him. So, if there's a chance that he gets moved, I think there's a very good chance that he gets moved.
I think
then
so.
You're golden. If he gets traded somewhere, his value goes up immediately. And then you look, if he doesn't get moved, say November 1st comes and goes, and he doesn't get traded, they're not going to let him sit on the roster and do nothing. He's going to play anyway. And I think that we'll start to see that usage go up anyway, despite the fact that, he was the center of trade talks this trade deadline. I think that he's going to be fine. I think that you could go trade for him right now, get him very cheap, and the return, regardless of what happens, is going to be good for you.
I think so. I think that's a great point. I had another point in my head about Kareem Hunt, and I totally forgot what it was. But that's okay. Let's move on. Let's move on to Fournette. Yeah. Maybe. I'm selling Leonard Fournette, man. And this one is tough for me. This is really tough for me. I was struggling with this one personally. The Bucs were in a must-win situation last week, right? And Leonard Fournette, wasn't on the field in a lot of critical situations. And Rachaad White has been way too involved in every situation, on all 3 downs, 2-minute drills, that sort of thing. And he has been on the field 40% of snaps or more taken away from Fournette 3 times over the last 4 weeks. And he's looked good. I'm not saying that Rachaad White is going to take over this backfield. But what I'm saying is that Fournette might not have a stranglehold on all these touches, right? He might not have a stranglehold on all the routes. That's my concern for him. And on top of that, the Bucs offense isn't looking good. So maybe this offense ends up turning around and Fournette can end up, returning some value. And he's going to have his games just like he did over the past 2 weeks before this past week. But with Rachaad White getting better, with them seemingly wanting to have him, play more, I think as of, this week, you can still get solid value for Leonard Fournette. I think he's still being viewed as an RB1. I'm still playing him as an RB1 as of right now. However, it's a little shaky. Me personally, I want to move Fournette now, get some good value back, like good value, right? And, kind of deassociate myself with the risk that Fournette has right now.
I think this might be an overestimate of the risk that we're talking about. I know Rachaad White has looked good, and obviously the Buccaneers offense hasn't looked the same as it did last season. But I think we're blowing out of proportion a little bit the risk here. I look at Leonard Fournette's usage, and it's very appealing to me. I like what I saw the 2 weeks before this last week, obviously against the Panthers, and this is just a new low for the Buccaneers. I don't think this kind of trouble that they're going to have on offense is going to stick around much longer, that they'll get it turned around. I look at Leonard Fournette. I'm not worried about Rachaad White coming up on him. Tom Brady threw the ball almost 50 times, I think, against the Panthers. And it was a negative game script the whole time against a team that they should have been beaten up on. It's so uncharacteristic. I think that to kind of have, Leonard Fournette, he did have a bad week, but I don't think that his risk is enough that I'm looking to move him and get rid of him. I think that his upside is there, and it's enough for me to hold on to him. And obviously, it makes sense. I can hear where you're coming from. His value, even though he did have a bad week, is still hovering up in that RB1 range right now. You could get a good return. But at this point, I'm just waiting out the storm because I think that he's going to be just fine. We saw his upside flash when he caught a bunch of balls a couple of weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago. So I'm not hitting the panic button on Leonard Fournette. I'm not going to try and sell him just yet. I think he can turn around and have a good game against the Ravens. I'm not worried about it right now, so I would hold him for now. That's my assessment. At sell, I could see it, but for now, I think the best move would be to hold in this Buccaneers offense. Plenty of times, I know Rachaad White is breathing down his neck. I think that as long as he's healthy, he's going to be a solid fantasy RB1. He had a bad week. I'm not worried about it just yet.
Yeah, no, I hear you, man. If here's the thing, right? Like 2 weeks ago, the targets were up there, right? And he ended up getting targeted on a ton of routes. So this past week, he was targeted on 13% of routes, but his route participation was at 52%. The week before, it was at 73%, right? And the target share was at 17%, which is great. Target share before that was at 20%. His route participation has been above 50%, 55% once over the past 4 weeks, and that was in week 6 when he got targeted a ton. The 2-minute situation, Rachaad White got all of that this past week, which is very interesting to me. The rushing attempts, Leonard Fournette was under 50% of the team's rushing attempts twice in the last 4 weeks. For me, like I love Leonard Fournette. I was drafting him to be this, potentially high in RB1, but if I can get back another, if I can get back like Travis Etienne plus a wide receiver 3, I might do that. If I can get back a Joe Mixon plus a wide receiver 3, I might do that. Something like that, right? Like I can get high end assets back. If I want to trade him for, a borderline, high end wide receiver 2, I might do that, right? Depending on what I need. It's just a situation that doesn't scream like, oh man, like his utilization. Even when if the offense improves, I'm not worried about it. If the offense gets much better, I'm not worried about it. And we might not want to, be against the GOAT here. Like we might not want to say like, oh man, this offense isn't going to get better, but it's Tom Brady. They'll likely get better. The offensive line is actually okay. You know what I'm saying? Like they've just been playing bad. And they've had a couple of issues. I think they can fix that. But it's not super encouraging to me. I get what you're saying. Like Leonard Fournette is a good player. They signed him for a reason. And what he has going for him is this. On the routes that he does run, he gets targeted a ton, right? Like his targets per route run this year is at 20%. And over the past, not this past week and the week before, but in weeks 4 and 5, 28% targets per route run and 35% targets per route run in week 4 and week 5. So if that continues, if he continues to get peppered on the routes that he does run, then I think he should be okay. But I might be trying to get out of it soon. I don't know. That's my spiel.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about Tyler Boyd. Now, we're not buying Tyler Boyd. Okay, I think that's obvious. We're going to sell Tyler Boyd. And Tyler Boyd cannot be sold on his own, right?
No.
But he had a huge week 7. And in this type of situation, you have to try to add him to some sort of package where you can upgrade, right? So you have to add him onto good players in a package, in an outgoing package to try and upgrade. Okay, so if you look at Boyd's game log, it looks pretty solid. It looks really solid. He's actually the current wide receiver 17 right now. Okay, so those are great selling points.
Game log it reminds me of Mike.
Who? I missed that.
Sorry, did you hear me? I don't know. It was lagging because you responded a little bit late. It reminds me of Michael Pittman.
Oh, there you go. There you go.
If you look at it, just
maybe
game for game, 2 blow-up games.
Maybe you put Tyler Boyd.
A safe floor.
I hear that, man. Maybe put Tyler Boyd and another guy, and maybe go get Michael Pittman. Maybe you could just buy Michael Pittman straight up for Tyler Boyd. That probably won't happen.
No,
but you might be able to add a little something to it to upgrade, right? And that's kind of what we're looking at. You're not necessarily looking to upgrade from Tyler Boyd to a better player than Tyler Boyd, but it's more like you package up a better player than Michael Boyd, somebody who you're starting every week, anyone would start every week. Add Tyler Boyd to it. Was I saying Michael Boyd? Tyler Boyd to it, and then you could upgrade that other player that's in this package. I hope that makes sense. That's kind of how I'm looking at it. So, like, I just sold my Tyler Boyd very recently. I was able to get Jonathan Taylor in a package with Tyler Boyd. Okay, it was a 3-for-1 type of deal, but it worked. Okay, so like Tyler Boyd, the people who are desperate, people who need wide receivers, some depth, and all that, like. You never know what could happen. Okay, so I would put those packages together right now, right after Tyler Boyd had an amazing game.
Right. I think that's the only way to approach it because I think that's all Tyler Boyd is going to be, just a nice little add to a trade piece. in the rest of the season. I mean, I don't know.
Okay, Zach is having some audio issues right now, so we're gonna get him off for now, and then we'll bring him back in once his audio gets a little bit better. But let's continue. I'm gonna move on to Aaron Jones right now. Aaron Jones, he's been super frustrating to have this year, but he just had a 2-touchdown game, right? And you have to sell. The Packers' offense hasn't looked good. And this touchdown, he just had a 10-target game as well. So that's likely a flash in the pan. So I'm hoping that, you can take advantage of that situation. AJ Dillon hasn't been somebody who, has been super involved, but at the same time, like, I don't think I'm going to be depending on Aaron Jones moving forward. That's kind of where I'm at with this, with Aaron Jones. Now, if you have Aaron Jones, he's been frustrating, but this is kind of a situation that you've been hoping for. You've been hoping for him to have a big game so that you can potentially move him. So I'm adding Aaron Jones plus another guy, another player to that package. And I'm going to potentially move up and try to upgrade from Aaron Jones. If I can get a wide receiver 2 for Aaron Jones, I do that right now. Okay. Another guy I want to sell right now is Deebo Samuel. And this one's tough, obviously, because we know Deebo Samuel is a very talented player. But Brandon Ayuk, he has seen more target share than Deebo over the last 2 weeks, right? And now Christian McCaffrey is going to come in and take some of the overall target share away as well from Deebo Samuel, all these other guys. So, you got Kittle getting some target share, you got Deebo getting target share, you got Brandon Ayuk, and now you're gonna get Christian McCaffrey, right? And on top of that, Deebo's dealing with a hamstring injury right now. So while that's happening, I am going to sell Deebo Samuel. He hasn't even put like these crazy games together this year so far, right? He's had one blow up game so far. He's been relatively consistent for you, but at the end of the day, he hasn't really won you games. He's won you 1 week. That week where Jimmy found him, in the middle of the field, and he was able to like break 14 tackles against the Rams, for that long touchdown. But outside of that, hasn't really been crazy, right? So I'm looking to sell him now. I think there's still an allure around Deebo Samuel where you can try to, you know, uh, get some serious value back. And people might be viewing Deebo Samuel as this high end, this wide receiver 1 every single week. And I don't view him as a wide receiver 1 right now, right? On top of that, is he going to get the type of carries that he was getting out of the backfield? He might get a couple of game, but I don't think he's going to get 4, 5, 6 with Christian McCaffrey there, right? That could potentially take away his value as well. Is he going to get as many of those goal line packages, right, around the red zone where he kind of gets those carries, those end arounds, and makes his way into the end zone? Now, his efficiency can go up with Christian McCaffrey there because defenses are going to have to pay attention to both, but I'm not depending on that. I want to depend on volume. And that's part of the reason why I wasn't drafting Deebo Samuel this year. So I'm selling him if I have him, and that's about it. All right, those are all of the buys and sells that I had. I do want to answer a few questions that are in the chat right now, since we're kind of early on time here. So let's go ahead and get a couple of those in there. A couple of trade questions, if possible. So AJ Ramos, appreciate the question, man. We got Saquon. He's given up Saquon Barkley for Amon-Ra St. Brown and Michael Pittman. I think this is a very even trade. AJ, it would really depend on who your running backs are. If you have a couple of high-end running backs, I'm okay with this deal because Amon-Ra St. Brown is a solid wide receiver 1, top 6, top 7 wide receiver for fantasy. So I'm cool with this. Especially in PPR leagues. If you can let me know who your running backs are in the chat right now, that'll be awesome so that I could see. But if your running backs are solid, I'll do this deal. If you don't have solid running backs, I might not because you're not getting a running back back in this deal. Running backs are, rare to have. High-end running backs are very rare to have this year. I might not do this deal if that's the case, but in a vacuum, I think this deal is fine. Okay. Let's go on to another trade question. Let's see who else we can get here. Rollins 15 is asking, should I just go ahead and trade Fournette for ETN? If you want to get rid of the risk, I'm okay with this deal. I think Fournette's ceiling is a little higher in that offense. especially with how he's been using the passing game in most of these games this year. So I think I'd rather keep Fournette right now, not trade him 1-for-1 for ETN just yet. I think you can potentially get a little bit more. If you can squeeze a little bit more out of the ETN manager, I might do that. But I think he's a solid target right now because ETN hasn't necessarily blown up yet. It's his backfield, but he hasn't had his blow up game just yet, and it's coming. Okay. Let's see. Philip Kurtz is asking, think it's possible to get Amon-Ra for Godwin straight up 10-man PPR dynasty league? Man, in a dynasty league, it's possible. It is possible. I think, Amon-Ra St. Brown being a 4th round wide receiver, his overall dynasty value hasn't been extremely high, but the performances that he has elevated him, right? And you don't want to bet on 4th round wide receivers in dynasty, but at the same time, this is a situation where, you could be potentially buying in cheap. I'm okay with this deal. However, Chris Godwin is he's probably a top 15 dynasty wide receiver right now. Amon-Ra St. Brown's probably top 20, right? If you want to take the shot on this, I get it. I think Amon-Ra St. Brown's ceiling is higher. So I'm okay with this. And yes, I do think that this is possible in dynasty. Not in redraft, obviously, but in dynasty, I do think it's possible. K-Bar is asking, would you trade Ramondre Stevenson for Jonathan Taylor? His other running backs are Mixon. He has both James Conner and Benjamin, and he has Patterson on injured reserve. This is one of those deals, man. If this is a PPR league, I don't know. I mean, I do like Taylor more rest of season. I think I would make this move. However, I think I might try to get Taylor a different way, if possible. I kind of want to, if I could trade Mixon plus another piece for Taylor, I think I prefer to do that. If I could, and get back another piece with Taylor, if I kind of want to balance this deal out a little bit more if possible. But in a vacuum, Stevenson to get back Jonathan Taylor, I think that's fine. I think Taylor does have more upside, especially with Damian Harris still in that backfield. You never know. Damian Harris can get moved, and then Stevenson's the guy, right? So I would hold off for now, personally, but I think that you can potentially use other pieces to buy Jonathan Taylor. I might hold off on that. Okay. Connor Heim is asking, should I trade Josh Jacobs and Courtland Sutton for Hopkins and ETN? I would not make this deal, Connor. He has JT, Mixon, and Kenneth Walker as well. That's some solid running backs right there. I would not make this deal. Josh Jacobs is, the best running back that you have right now. And I don't say that lightly. You have JT, you have Mixon, you have Walker, but I don't want to get rid of my best asset, and move him. I'd rather, if you want Hopkins, you can get him, but you'll be buying him high. I'd rather get rid of Mixon, Walker, JT. I don't want to get rid of any of those guys. So personally, I might want to trade 2 of these running backs to a running back needy team and upgrade. Like, can you trade Mixon and Walker for Christian McCaffrey? Like, I'd rather do that, right? If you're looking for a wide receiver, I'd rather trade 1-for-1. One of these running backs for a wide receiver instead. All right. That's kind of how I view it. Trey's asking, is Hopkins a sell high player? I think he is. I should have put him on the show here. He should have been on the show as a sell high. I do want to trade Hopkins high right now. He had 50% target share in his first game. That's not going to happen, obviously. Okay. Rondale Moore was playing on the outside. That's not going to happen. He's going to play in the slot, and he's going to get 7 to 8 targets a game. Zach Ertz only had a couple of targets in this game. That's not going to happen. He's going to get 5, 6, 7 targets a game. Robbie Anderson is going to be their deep threat. He's going to get some targets a game. Last year, Hopkins didn't get 10-plus targets in any game except one. And that was later on when he was banged up. But through the first 7, 8 games before he was really hurt, he didn't have one double-digit target game. Okay? On top of that, you're going to have Marquise Brown coming back, maybe in 4 weeks or something like that, 5 weeks potentially. At that point, I wouldn't bet against Hollywood to get more targets than Hopkins. So yeah, I do think Hopkins is a sell high player. And you can get some good value from Hopkins, and I would do that. I wouldn't sell him for peanuts, but I feel like the allure around Hopkins, him coming back and then him having a big game, I would look at the circumstances of this and realize that this is not what's going to happen moving forward. Also, Hopkins played like 50% out of his routes out of the slot. That's not going to happen either, especially considering the guys that they do have playing out of the slot on a regular basis. Fabian's asking, are we still selling Ramondre Stevenson? No, we are not. We are not selling him. 77% of snaps this past week with Damian Harris there, with him practicing in full all week long. I'm not selling Ramondre right now until I see this becoming more of a split between him and Harris. But the fact that Harris only had 3 carries in this game, that bodes well for Ramondre Stevenson moving forward. All right, that's going to do it, guys, for this episode. Appreciate you guys so much. Hopefully Zach will be back tomorrow. He'll fix his audio issues, and we'll be good to go. Tomorrow we're going to go over our quarterback rankings and our running back rankings. So make sure you tune in for that, 9 a.m. Eastern time, or you can listen to it on the podcast, on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts. If you could subscribe to the podcast on one of those platforms, that would mean the world to us. If you're watching on YouTube, you can also subscribe to the YouTube channel, Upper Hand Fantasy YouTube channel. That would mean the world to us as well. Appreciate you guys. Take it easy. See ya.